I'm Jesse Hayes. I'm a commercial fisherman in the Florida Keys. And the footage you're watching right now was absolutely lost and found at sea. And it's a pretty damn weird story. I'm not gonna lie, some mistakes were made, but I think it all worked out in the end, and you'll see why. I recently started experimenting with filming underwater with a GoPro and a chum basket. And I thought it would be kind of cool to drop it on a wreck down here off of Islamorada in the Florida Keys. So me and a buddy picked a nice day where the weather was good and the visibility looked alright, and we ran out to the wreck to drop it. Unfortunately, immediately after I got the camera situated on the bottom, the steering on my boat went out. I looked up and my forward steering station was dumping hydraulic fluid, so I was unable to control where my boat was going. And that's a big fucking problem. Now, I had been bully netting the night before, and I was in kind of a lazy mood, and I didn't bother taking the trolling motor off of the bow of my boat. So I was able to limp the boat back to shore with the trolling motor, and we just sort of putted back. It took a long goddamn time. It took hours. But at the time, I had to decide if I was going to maneuver back over and bring the camera back up before I left, or if I was going to leave it there to try to get the footage and come back for it. So I opted to just leave it there and let it record and see what happened. That was a mistake. But I got the boat home, ran to the parts store, got the new seal, and repaired the steering for the boat. So we ran back out to the wreck to pick up my camera, and it was nowhere to be found. It was just gone. And I assumed that, like a shark or something had just bitten the rope off and it was gone forever. I mean, it's a box of food with a bright light attached to it. There's a lot of predators that just wouldn't be able to say no to that. So gone forever as far as I was concerned. That night I actually ordered new equipment. I just ordered new everything, and I was starting to make plans to build a new tripod, because I like doing this stuff, and I wasn't done doing it. It was just, bad luck. Skip ahead about a week, and I've already got all the new equipment. It's already arrived in the mail. And I get a random phone call from a mysterious phone number I don't recognize, but it's a local area code. Turns out it's a fellow commercial fisherman whom I have never met, but he was pulling lobster traps on the Atlantic side, and he found my tripod with a GoPro attached to it. Apparently it had carabinered itself onto the line between his lobster traps at 240 feet deep. Now, the housing for the camera and the lighting system were not designed to handle pressure at that depth. That's like around 7 atmospheres or something like that. So pretty much the camera was fucked, the light was fucked, everything that held any kind of electricity was just full of water and completely ruined. But the SD card was still good. So he pulled the SD card out of the camera, plugged it into his own computer, and started looking at footage that was on the SD card, and he recognized some of the files on there were from videos I had already made and just not deleted. Weirdly enough, this guy actually follows me on TikTok, so he knew immediately who I was, and he reached out to another commercial fisherman down here in my neighborhood and asked him if he knew him. Like, hey, do you know this Jesse guy? And he's like, yeah. And he got my number from him, and that's how he got me connected back with the carcass of my camera equipment. So the next day I ran up to Key Largo, where this guy was at. Apparently the goddamn thing traveled about 20-something miles to get up there and carabiner itself to his fishing gear. And picked it up and started going through all the equipment. You can actually kind of see a little bit of the wreck in the background there. It's just kind of a shadow. But, yeah, it worked out really well. I mean, as well as I could hope for. I got my equipment back, but the camera was shot. Honestly, all of this is my own goddamn fault. I just didn't take a lot of factors into consideration when I was doing this. The rate of the drift, the strength of the current, the weight and drag of what I was throwing in the ocean. I just wasn't paying close enough attention and, didn't do the math. Because you can see on the screen right now, this is where the camera already made it to bottom, but it didn't land correctly. So I was trying to compensate where it was going. I was dragging it because the current had drug it so far from where I was trying to put it to begin with, not on the wreck. That water is hauling ass down there. So was the footage I got worth the sacrifice of my GoPro and light? Not really. Was the story way cooler than the footage I actually got? In my opinion, yeah, I think it's fucking rad. How it all worked out and the connections that were made. And I just think my life is absurd, and this is a great example of that. Maybe if I was a little smarter about how I did some things, my life would be a little less absurd. But fuck it, I'm having a good time. So there it is. It just touched down on bottom where I was going to be leaving it. There's some AJs that had followed it down. A little school of them circling there. Kind of curious. And I pick it up a couple of times, make sure it's secure before I abandon it to its own fate, before everything got sucked down into that current. And from here, it just sort of starts doing a Neil Armstrong impression, and just like it's walking and bouncing across the surface of the moon. And it just goes like that for a long goddamn ways. And this right here, I just cut to it. You can see the slope that it's on, and it's a lot steeper than I anticipated it to be, but there's actually very little life down there. I left in some clips where you can kind of see some different animal life that did show up. Here's an anemone. I did not expect to see anemones down there that deep, but, there it is. Kind of cool. But this is like the surface of the moon. There's just not a lot of shit going on down there, but the current's really cooking. The sediment down there is so fine, it actually looks like smoke when the current rips it away after it's been disturbed. This is definitely like another planet compared to the shallows inshore. And here's a surprise. It's a little flatfish, about 2 inches long, called a flabby sole. And I'm not making that up. That's what that fish is actually called. Not expected to see that down there either. I had no idea flatfish live that deep down here. They're not like halibut or anything. They don't get very big. But this, we're coming to the end where the camera just blinks out and everything dies. But this is all the footage that I got that I thought was worth sharing. So, lost and found. There we go. I guess I need to keep better track of my shit, huh?